restrained from material mental activities by practice of yoga. This is characterized by one's ability to see the self by the pure mind and to relish and rejoice in the self. In that joyous state, one is situated in boundless transcendental happiness and enjoys himself through transcendental senses. Established thus, one never departs from the truth, and upon gaining this, he thinks there is no greater gain. Being situated in such a position, one is never shaken, even in the midst of greatest difficulty. This indeed is actual freedom from all miseries arising from material contact. Text 24 in unison. Sannischayena yoktavyo yogo nirvina cetasa sankalpa prabhavan kamams tyaktva sarvan asheshataha manasarvendriya gramam viniyamya samantataha. One should engage oneself in the practice of yoga with undeviating determination and faith. One should abandon without exception all material desires born of false ego, and thus control all the senses on all sides by the mind. Text 25. Shanai shanar uparamed buddhyadriti grihitaya atma sangstam manakritva na kinchid api chintayet. Gradually, step by step, with full conviction, one should become situated in trance by means of intelligence, and thus the mind should be fixed on the self alone and should think of nothing else. Text 26. Yato yato nischalati manas chanchalam astiram tatastato niyam yartar atmanyeva vasham nayet. From whatever and wherever the mind wanders, due to its flickering and unsteady nature, one must certainly withdraw it and bring it back under the control of the self. Text 27. Prashanta manasam yenam yoginam sukhamutamam upaiti shanta rajasam brahmabhutam akalam asyam. The yogi whose mind is fixed on me verily attains the highest happiness. By virtue of his identity with Brahman, he is liberated. His mind is peaceful, his passions are quieted, and he is freed from the sin. Text 28. Yunjannevam sadatmanam yogi vigata kalmashaha sukhena brahma samsparsham atyantam sukhamashnute. Steady in the self, being freed from all material contamination, the yogi achieves the highest perfectional stage of happiness in touch with the Supreme Consciousness. Text 29. Sarvabhutastamatmanam sarvabhutani chatmani ikshate yoga yuktatma sarvatra samadarshanaha. A true yogi observes me in all beings and also sees every being in me. Indeed, the self-realized man sees me everywhere. Text 30. Yo mam pashyati sarvatra sarvam cha mai pashyati tasyaham na prashasyami sam cha me na prashannashyati. For one who sees me everywhere and sees everything in me, I am never lost, nor is he ever lost to me. Thank you very much for chanting. That was fun. So now we'll return back to page number 313, or I guess 314. And we'll read the translation and the purport given by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The stage of perfection is called trance or samadhi, when one's mind is completely restrained from material mental activities by practice of yoga. This is characterized by one's ability to see the self by the pure mind and to relish and rejoice in the self. In that joyous state, one is situated in boundless transcendental happiness and enjoys himself through transcendental senses. Established thus, one never departs from the truth, and upon gaining this, he thinks there is no greater gain. Being situated in such a position, one is never shaken, even in the midst of greatest difficulty. This indeed is actual freedom from all miseries arising from material contact. Purport. By practice of yoga, one becomes gradually detached from material concepts. This is the primary characteristic of the yoga principle. And after this, one becomes situated in trance or samadhi, which means that the yogi realizes the supersoul through transcendental mind and intelligence, without any of the misgivings of identifying the self with the super-self. Yoga practice is more or less based on the principles of the Patanjali system. Some unauthorized commentators try to identify the individual soul with the super-soul, and the monists think this to be liberation, but they do not understand the real purpose of the Patanjali system of yoga. There is an acceptance of transcendental pleasure in the Patanjali system, but the monists do not accept this transcendental pleasure out of fear of jeopardizing the theory of oneness. The duality of knowledge and knower is not accepted by the non-dualist, but in this verse, transcendental pleasure, realized through transcendental senses, is accepted. And this is corroborated by the Patanjali Muni, the famous exponent of the yoga system. The great sage declares in his Yoga Sutras, Purushartha shunyanam gunanam pratiprasavaha kaivalyam sarupratishta vachiti shaktiriti. This chitti shakti, or internal potency, is transcendental. Purushartha means material religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and at the end, the attempt to become one with the Supreme. This, quote, oneness with the Supreme is called kaivalyam by the monist. But according to Patanjali, this kaivalyam is an internal or transcendental potency by which the living entity becomes aware of his constitutional position. In the words of Lord Chaitanya, this state of affairs is called Chaito Dharpana Marjanam, or clearance of the impure mirror of the mind. This, quote, clearance is actually liberation, or Bhava Mahadhavagni Nirvapanam. The theory of nirvana, also preliminary, corresponds with this principle. In the Bhagavatam, this is called Sarupena Vyavastitihi. The Bhagavad Gita also confirms this situation in this verse. After nirvana, or material cessation, there is the manifestation of spiritual activities, or devotional service to the Lord, known as Krishna consciousness. In the words of the Bhagavatam, Sarupena Vyavastitihi, this is the, quote, real life of the living entity. Maya, or illusion, is the condition of spiritual life contaminated by material infection. Liberation from this material infection does not mean destruction of the original eternal position of the living entity. Patanjali also accepts this by his words, Kaivalyam Surupratishta Vachiti Shaktiriti. This Chitti Shakti, or transcendental pleasure, is real life. This is confirmed in the Vedanta Sutras as Anandamayo Vyasat. This natural transcendental pleasure is the ultimate goal of yoga and is easily achieved by execution of devotional service or bhakti yogi. Yoga. Bhakti Yoga will be vividly described in the 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. In the yoga system, as described in this chapter, there are two kinds of samadhi called sampragyata samadhi and asampragyata samadhi. When one becomes situated in the transcendental position by various philosophical researches, it is called sampragyata samadhi. In the asampragyata samadhi, there is no longer any connection with mundane pleasure, for one is then transcendental to all sorts of happiness derived from the senses. When the yogi is once situated in that transcendental position, he is never shaken from it. Unless the yogi is able to reach this position, he is unsuccessful. Today's so-called yoga practice, which involves various sense pleasures, is contradictory. A yogi indulging in sex and intoxication is a mockery. Even those yogis who are attracted by the siddhis, perfections, in the process of yoga are not perfectly situated. If the yogis are attracted by the byproducts of yoga, then they cannot attain the stage of perfection, as is stated in this verse. Persons therefore indulging in the make-show practice of gymnastic feats or siddhis should know that the aim of yoga is lost in that way. The best practice of yoga in this age is Krishna consciousness, which is not baffling. A Krishna conscious person is so happy in his occupation that he does not aspire after any other happiness. There are many impediments, especially in this age of hypocrisy, to practicing Hatha Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, and Jnana Yoga. But there is no such problem in executing Karma Yoga or Bhakti Yoga. As long as the material body exists, one has to meet the demands of the body, namely eating, sleeping, defending, and mating. But a person who is in pure Bhakti Yoga or in Krishna consciousness does not arouse the senses while meeting the demands of the body. Rather, he accepts the bare necessities of life, making the best use of a bad bargain, and enjoys transcendental happiness in Krishna consciousness. He is callous toward incidental occurrences such as accidents, disease, scarcity, and even the death of a most dear relative. But he is always alert to execute his duties in Krishna consciousness or Bhakti Yoga. Accidents never deviate him from his duty. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita, Agama paino nityas tangsatikshyas bharata. He endures all such incidental occurrences because he knows that they come and go and do not affect his duties. In this way, he achieves the highest perfection in yoga practice. That was a big purport. So Prabhupada touched on many things, but first he starts off with that we have to become free from the material concepts, that these material concepts are actually meant to be, thrown away in the practice of yoga. And if we hang on to these, then it can't be said that we've reached a perfection in yoga. So then Prabhupada goes in to start kind of hitting on these misconceptions. First one he touched on was that the soul is the same as the super soul. That the soul within this body, me, myself, I am actually one with the super soul who's present in every body. So this is not supported even by Patanjali Muni, who is more or less the presenter of this path, which is followed by persons who have this misconception. So this is actually the Maya's so tricky that even we're following something which is actually moving in the direction towards, it's actually, it may be pure, but still we may accept it in an improper way to support our own conclusions or our own motivations. So Prabhupada points out that there's a transcendental pleasure which is relished in relation to the super soul, that there's an internal potency, that these yogis, they're actually experiencing some bliss, but this oneness with the Supreme, the monists or the impersonalists, or the many persons go by the name Vedantists, or non-dualists, as Prabhupada used, they're thinking that it's all one, this identification with the oneness. That's called kaivalyam, or, oneness with the Supreme. But Prabhupada is actually presenting, but actually Patanjali, when he says kaivalyam, he means that there's an internal potency. It's transcendental, it's spiritual. And by that, by which the living entity becomes aware of his constitutional position, that he's actually a spirit soul. And actually, eventually, there is an awareness that I have an eternal relationship with the Supreme, which is actually based on service. And that's the bliss which is actually accessed through the bhakti scriptures very easily, very quickly, through the bhakti scriptures, or primarily Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. That these texts are like the cream of the Vedas. That this is actually the essence, the sar, or the cream of that, these Vedic texts. And it cuts right to the chase. And right when you enter, especially when you hear from the acharyas, what do they say? They right away tell you, you are not your body, you are a spirit soul. But more than that, you are an eternal servant of Krishna. And Krishna is actually Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's the best person, and we're all part of him. We're meant to actually give service to him. This is how you can act in accordance with that real identity. Don't wait. Do it now. Right away they tell us like that. So then we don't have to worry about trying to understand all this improperly. And this is what's nice, is that if we have determined who's actually an authority on this knowledge, then we can save ourselves so much trouble. We don't have to do some massive study and risk cheating myself. Because actually, we like to cheat. And what we do is we actually cheat ourselves from the perfection that's awaiting us by becoming satisfied with something less than the full truth. Less than the full truth. And ultimately, there's a trick of Maya, that the last snare of Maya is when one thinks that he himself is actually God. So Prabhupada is actually talking about how this is actually is not in line with this, with Patanjali Muni. And there's something beyond nirvana, beyond liberation. And in Nectar Devotion, there's so many awesome quotes about how Bhakti Yoga is so much, way more nectar than liberation. Merging with the Supreme and losing my personal identity. The thing is, that's just a fantasy anyway. You can't ever stop being you, a person. You can lose your material conceptions and your material identity, which is false. But after that stage, there's actually eternal service to the Supreme Person. And we're just waiting to get a hold of that. We want to actually be on that, in that bhakti rasa. What's nice is that, say we want to enjoy in this material world so many pleasures. We're not even really interested in yoga anyway, but we just want to enjoy. Okay. That's a sarva kama, right? You have all sorts of desires. Then there's somebody who actually wants to merge into the Supreme. I want to actually end my existence. Then I'll actually have reached perfection. That's my goal. Then that's moksha kama. He wants to be liberated. He's desiring some liberation or freedom from suffering, freedom from bodily identification. Okay, he still has his desires. Then, as Prabhupada mentioned, there may be some person who wants the siddhis, who wants a lot of power in this material world. He wants to touch the moon or fly, just like, in Siddhaloka, they can float like a feather. Okay. Or if you have no desires, a kama, then you should actually worship Krishna. That's a statement of Bhagavatam, that you'll reach the perfection of all those desires by worshiping the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, this reaches its perfection when one becomes completely satisfied by executing his duties in relation to Krishna. And so Prabhupada mentions at the end that these lower yogas, by trying to get something material, the real aim of yoga is lost. But when we're in this world, we have the body, so we have to meet the demands of the body. Actually, that's meant to be done in a way which doesn't unnecessarily agitate. This is something we have to work on. So, we make the best use of a bad bargain by accepting the bare necessities. That is the statement of the Shastra and the statement of the Acharyas. That there's a quota, and we should know that I have my quota according to my body and mind, but I'm not meant to be greedy and go above that. But because we have our tendency for these unpure habits, then we may have trouble to actually cap ourselves at our quota at the time when we begin devotional service. But we should know that that is my goal. Let me just meet the demands, nothing more, nothing less. Jai. It must have been part of your quota. Right? Actually, our quota is Krishna Prasad. Let us be satisfied with that. Then we'll go on and we'll make advancement. And naturally, we will see the need. I must take what is mine. Actually, this is not mine. This is actually Krishna's. And he's letting me have some of it. I'll take what is needed. I'll leave the rest for someone else. He'll make sure it goes where it needs to go. Okay. So, at the end, Prabhupada says that sometimes there may be some different, there may be some incidental occurrences, such as accidents, disease, scarcity, and even the death of a most dear relative. But the devotee is always ready to execute one's duty in Krishna consciousness. That I know I have my spiritual duty, which actually goes beyond the body. And that is my primary focus. And actually, one who regularly chants their prescribed number of rounds on Japamala beads, that person is actually said to be quite advanced. That, yes, sometimes one may actually find so many faults with the devotees of Krishna, especially in this Krishna consciousness movement, which has gone all over the world and has taken persons from all sorts of atheistic cultures and given them Krishna and given them sadhana, and people are taking it because this doesn't have anything to do with some mundane boundary lines. No, you can't have it. You can't have this process. It's for us. No, it's for the soul. It's non-sectarian. Prabhupada would oftentimes, he would stress this. Don't misunderstand this movement. Don't think it is material. This is a spiritual movement from the spiritual world where we are all actually residents. This has nothing to do with some mundane distinctions based on the body. Everybody can take it. Let us actually get as many people as possible. Let us chant Hare Krishna, and as much as possible, give us facility to actually distribute Krishna Prasadam. Then all the problems of society, quarreling between this group and this group, that group and this one, will stop automatically. Because this is a spiritual movement from the spiritual world. And when we import the spiritual world by the chanting of this Hare Krishna mantra, Golokera Pramadana, Harinama Sankirtana, then this place becomes the spiritual world. And there's no envy, there's no greed, there's no lust, like that. So, it's not that we have to hear sufficiently to understand that this place is not my home. No amount of meeting my duty on this material level will actually satisfy myself or anyone else. I can become perfect at my material duties. But what is the gain if I have not actually developed my love for Krishna, which is my real identity? And actually this is stated by Narad Muni in the 5th chapter of the 1st canto, and he also states the inverse, that if somebody, even if they're immature in their transcendental realization, but they take a jump and dive deep into transcendental service, disregarding that they actually have many attachments for the material world. And eventually they fall back to those attachments because of immaturity. He says there's no loss. There's no loss for such a person. Even if they have to go back to some mundane activities because of their immaturity in realization. So this is the wonderful benefit of Bhakti Yoga, that there's no loss or diminution. And this is the real goal. This is the real occupation of every soul. Beyond, what were the four that were mentioned here? Dharma, material religiosity, Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. Right? there's something beyond those which is actually presented or given as a gift in the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is that you have your birthright to pure devotional service. And so when one is fixed on that service, which is actually given through the medium of the spiritual master in the parampara system, then that is called samadhi, and one becomes fixed. And it's not that there's no disturbances, it's a science. So there's many gradual steps, but the main rock of it is to refrain from sinful life with a strict adherence, and also positively engage in yoga, or positively engage in positively associate with the Supreme Pure through His supremely holy name, which is Himself, meaning the Hare Krishna mantra. We associate with Krishna and Radha through the holy name of the Maha Mantra. So, Ananda Prabhu?
Can I make a comment? Is that okay?
Yes, Prabhu.
So, I wanted to reread this statement in the purport, which sums up everything Prabhupada is saying in the principle very nicely, about how after nirvana or cessation of material existence, then real life actually begins. So Prabhupada gives this point in the purport. He says, Maya, or illusion, is the condition of spiritual life contaminated by material infection. So the same conditions that we find in the spiritual world, you'll find here in the material world pervertedly manifested. But in the spiritual world, they exist in its pure form. So I was thinking how nice Krishna conscious is, because it's not artificial imposition on the soul. Because the soul is still experiencing the same principles that he would be experiencing in the spiritual world, but in a perverted way, very nasty way, actually. So therefore, the soul is never satisfied here. But some people think spiritual life is just, one-sided, or those sadhus who may have a big smile and a big beard, they're actually spiritual. But in spiritual life, there's so much variety. There's sadness, there's dejection, there's fear, there's lamentation. But it's all arranged, just like in this world, we have all these different aspects in life. But it's all perverted because there's no Krishna. It's not in relation to your spiritual life. So on our stage, because we don't have a direct relationship with Krishna, we're not seeing Krishna face to face, we may get a shadow of the real thing, in which we may sometimes feel anxiety to make spiritual advancement in a general way, or fear because we're not, doing things properly, or we're afraid of the illusory energy. So these are all good, actually. Or where we realize we don't have a taste for the process. I mean, that means the process is working. You actually realize you don't have a taste. That's a good step. Versus many people who just artificially pretend to be satisfied, but they're not actually. They're like, oh, I have so much love for Krishna, so much taste and so much, but you're like, you can tell that they don't actually by their actions, because they're not actually detached from this world at all. They're trying to enjoy, in the name of God consciousness, enjoy matter. So it's actually a good sign when someone realizes reality for what it is. The illusion is becoming unveiled, and we're actually seeing our situation in the sadhana platform, that we actually don't have taste for the illusory energy, for Krishna, and therefore that's a good position to be. Then we can genuinely, from that position, genuinely pray, because now we realized by this Cheto Darpana Marjanam our real position, and we can pray. Because the next verse after Cheto Darpana Marjanam is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Nam Namakari Bahudani Jasarva Shaktis. Right? That although you have invested all your powers in the holy names, And your holy names they're like you, they're non-different from you. You invested yourself in the holy name. Still, I have no attraction for these holy names. So if someone's chanting Hare Krishna, the first realization they'll get is that actually, I don't have real taste for the holy name. And it seems kind of contradictory, but that's actually a good place to be. And once, because you're actually realizing where you're actually at. So I just thought I'd add it because I was having a conversation about this earlier today. So Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. Yes, there's many wonderful songs by the acharyas that are just different ways to present this lamentation. That, like Lochandas Thakur says that I think that Yamaraj is actually punishing me because I have no attraction for this movement, which was started by Lord Nityananda and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, chanting and dancing in Prasadam. I don't have it. I don't have much attraction. I don't really like it so much. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur, today is his auspicious appearance day. He's there, the fourth painting on the wall at the bottom, Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He has a song, Kabe Habe Bolo Se Dinamar. When will that day actually be mine? And he says, Aparada Kuchi Shuddha Nama Vruchi. That when will I actually be free from offenses? My offenses will actually decrease, go down, and my taste for the holy name will actually come. Shuddha Nama Ruchi. When will I actually experience taste for the holy name? When will that day be mine? So the acharyas, they show what is real spiritual life, Not that I already have it. Like Maharaj was mentioning a few days ago, he said, when we chant the holy name, we're chanting, energy of the Lord, Srimati Radharani, beloved of Krishna. Oh, Lord Krishna, please engage me in your service. When we pray that, it's not that we're praying thinking, I did such good service, I'm already doing such nice service, but rather we're thinking, I haven't done it yet. I'm not there yet. I need your mercy so I can do something for you. So these are some things. Mataji? Aparada Kuchi Shuddha Nama Ruchi.
Hare Krishna. Can I share a poem by Bhaktivinoda Thakur? It's called Chant Anyway.
Chant anyway?
Is that all right?
I don't know. I never heard of it. So, where's it? What's the name?
Chant Anyway. It's from the Sharanagati.
Okay.
Okay, I'll try to read it quickly. Your mind is wandering all over the universe when you chant. Chant anyway. Your mind is wandering to the past and future when you chant. Chant anyway. You're not able to concentrate on Krishna's names while you chant. Chant anyway. You have no taste for chanting. Chant anyway. You have lusty desires. Chant anyway. You are making offenses in chanting. Chant anyway. You're not praying to Krishna to help you chant better. Chant anyway. You often chant late at night. Chant anyway. So why? Why should you chant despite all of the above obstacles? This is why. There is no vow like chanting the holy name, no knowledge superior to it, no meditation which comes anywhere near it, and it gives the highest result. No penance is equal to it, and nothing is as potent or powerful as the holy name. Chanting is the greatest act of piety and the supreme refuge. Even the words of the Vedas do not possess sufficient power to describe its magnitude. Chanting is the highest path to liberation, peace, and eternal life. It's the pinnacle of devotion, the heart's joyous proclivity and attraction, and the best form of the remembrance of the Supreme Lord. The holy name has appeared solely for the benefit of the living entities as their Lord and Master, their supreme worshipful object, and their spiritual guide and mentor. Whoever continuously chants Lord Krishna's holy name, even in his sleep, can easily realize that the name is a direct manifestation of Krishna himself, in spite of the influences of Kali Yuga.
Jai. Thank you very much. Is there like a Bengali or a Sanskrit name to that? Okay. So we got to chant anyway, Prabhu.
Is it okay with you if this morning I think Krishna Bhagavan mentioned Bhaktivinoda Thakur's schedule? I just wanted to read it real quick for the pleasure of the devotees. Is that okay with you?
Yes, Prabhu.
So Bhaktivinoda Thakur's strict daily schedule. So apparently he would rest from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. for 2 hours, and then he would wake up at 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. and write. Bhaktivinoda Thakur wrote many books actually, like this. And then from 4 a.m. to 4:30 a.m. he would rest. Then at 4:30 a.m. he would chant rounds, Japamala, till 7 a.m. And 7 a.m. to 7:30 a.m. he would do some correspondence. 7:30 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. he would study the scriptures and shastras. 9:30 a.m. to 10 a.m. he would take bath quickly and take prasadam, which was half a liter of milk, fruit, and 2 chapatis. He was very specific about how much he was eating. 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. he had his court duties. He was a magistrate, so he spent 3 hours doing that. And then from 1 to 2 p.m. he get an hour break from his court duties and refresh at home. 2 to 5 p.m. he go back to his court duties, so a total of 6 hours of work. 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. he would translate Sanskrit shastras to Bengali. And 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. bathe, prasadam, which was half a liter of milk, rice, and 2 chapatis. And that was pretty much all he did. So he would sleep about 3 hours, write for 8.5 hours, japa study 4 to 5 hours, and work 6 hours a day. So he was pretty strict and methodical about everything he did, actually. So he was very regulated. And he had 12 kids. So, and he gave attention to them as well. That was part of his refresh at home.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much, devotees. So let us pray to Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And through the mercy of Srila Prabhupada, we have knowledge of him, and that we can become strict and regulated in our devotional service in order to become more pleasing to the spiritual master and to Krishna. And ultimately, we want to be empowered so that we can help others also achieve the perfection of their lives, the supreme education. So, Bhagavad Gita ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees.